Welcome to Not Suitable for Work. I'm your host, Peter C. Diamond. You think your office is nuts? Wait until you hear some of these stories.
It's a story I tell people as a cautionary tale of what not to do in a pressure-filled situation.
And there's nothing like making a joke and looking at a room full of people who, are just stone-faced, and they know that you blew it.
What about our professional dynamic has given you a license to act in this way?
Here's your colleague that you've worked with for all these years, and do you know anything about him? Anything about him at all?
With each podcast, I interview folks who have a humorous work story to share. Along the way, I'll offer advice to help you make sense of your own office nonsense. Don't worry, no careers were harmed in making Not Suitable for Work. Names and places may have been changed to protect the not so innocent. Without further ado, let's get this show on the road. In the not-so-distant past, a pink slip was used to terminate an employee. It worked something like this. You'd get your paycheck, and if there was a pink slip attached, then you knew the gig was up, and it's time to look for a new job. That's it. Super efficient. The employer doesn't have to come face-to-face with an employee's tears, angry words, or idle threats. While this makes it easy for the employer, the practice was deemed cruel and heartless. An employee should deserve better. Unfortunately, I don't know if how people are fired, laid off, or made redundant has gotten much better. Most companies still don't get it right, even though they've had plenty of practice given how often it happens. In this episode, my guest, Tim Dean, an executive coach, shares how his previous employer was really bad at letting people go.
One of my first careers was with a company many have heard of, Westinghouse Electric, one of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania's corporate headquartered behemoths, 50,000 employees at one time, et cetera. So you can imagine just a variety of ways HR got involved with hiring, developing, and then unfortunately laying off. And that's where my stories come in, where in the years I was there, it was kind of a running joke, although sad joke, that there would be a layoff every Thanksgiving time frame so that the individuals would be extricated by the end of the calendar year, to therefore get off the books by January 1st, the beginning of the fiscal year.
So it would be a sad holiday for those people between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Guess what, kids? There's no gifts. Santa's not coming to our house this year.
Well, and it's, you could imagine in the specific kind of those that are literally affected for sure, but imagine then everyone else who's lived through some of these annually, that the knee-jerk kind of pause of, well, wait, is this the Christmas that we can finally buy a refrigerator or redo the basement or finally replace this car, or is this the holidays that I'm finally going to get hit? So you could imagine the multi-years of stop and start mental gymnastics, if you will, at least related to finances, that a lot of workers went through. I was there 8 years in different capacities, different divisions. Each of them, though, there was a layoff. I jokingly, somewhat seriously, though, say today, I survived 7 and finally got hit on the 8th.
So how long ago was this? And where in your career were you? So was it early in your career, mid in your career, and what were you doing?
This was Westinghouse was my first company out of undergrad. I had graduated Penn State with an engineering degree. At the time, Westinghouse, even their marketing roles required marketing professionals, new hires, to also possess an engineering undergrad. So the bulk of my roles through my 8 years at Westinghouse revolved around product marketing, marketing engineering, marketing director, marketing coordinator, those type of roles, supporting outside salespeople that were out there pounding the pavement.
You're in your first job, and one more question: at what point in your career did you experience the first kind of corporate layoff?
Let's see. I graduated in December. Started the new job early March, and it would have been that fall. Okay. So November, December of that same year. So I'd say within the first 10 months, 9 or 10 months.
Early indoctrination to the this is what happens in corporate America.
That this, at least for this company at that time frame, and certainly it was. And I knew it was coming months before it actually happened, simply because of my coworkers, individuals that had been there at the time 5, 10, 15 years or more. It wasn't a shock, certainly by November, to actually have it happen. It was already an expectation.
Yeah. And one more thing is that at the time, Westinghouse was a good brand name. So did you think when you were joining it, like, I'm joining a well-established, company that, people know and should have a solid career at?
Right. I mean, certainly within Pittsburgh. I mean, it's just, at one point, Pittsburgh had the third most corporate headquarters in the country. So again, it was a time when working at a company like Westinghouse in Pittsburgh had huge cachet. So it was a no-brainer to accept the job offer without knowing, of course, at the time, without internet, all the warts that were going on financially at corporate. But at the time, they had furniture, they had light bulbs, they had appliances, they had nuclear reactors. I mean, it was just this hodgepodge of different business units that were all successful independently of the others. So yeah, it was a huge feather. The thing that just comes to mind, though, and just to kind of cut to the chase, is after surviving several rounds of it, several years of it, through year 2 and 3, and still advancing in my career in some marketing capacity and getting opportunities maybe in a different business unit within the same division that I was in, and being able to demonstrate accomplishments, et cetera. So that continued. It's just there were individuals within the marketing arena that either through name only or certainly colleagues and even good friends that every year I knew someone that was being let go within the marketing unit or the marketing group. Fast forward to my 7th year, and this is where it gets surreal. We knew it was coming. Again, we kind of expected it. Unfortunately, it was handled so horrifically because that year, no one knew when. That was kind of the big mystery, is when would the other shoe drop each year in terms of date and how it would be communicated. And this one year, again, no one knew it was coming when, and everyone was just going through their regular days as normal. And little did we know that 5 of my colleagues, including my boss, all received what would perceive to be regular business-related emails inviting them individually to different meetings, like as if it was part of their projects that were in progress. Unbeknownst to each one of those 5, and not surprisingly, all 5 meetings, and I'm using air quotes, were all scheduled for the exact same time in 5 different rooms. All 5 of them bringing their work product and notebook and ready to continue on whatever the project was, walked in and they see their boss, and then of course there's HR sitting, and then each of them was unfortunately taken through the typical cookie cutter text of, sorry, do we have to let you go? It's not you, it's a business decision. But what floored me even more, and it was bad enough, again, that these individuals were going to have their careers upended, is did you really have to lie to them and set them up to invite them to a bogus meeting, so now you have to humiliate them in addition to letting them go? That infuriated me, so much so that I wrote an email that day as we found out the 5 people who got hit and were affected and let go, I sent an email to the division general manager and CC'd the 5 people and just said in a very short 2-sentence email, sort of what I just said. I said, it's bad enough, but you don't have to lie to them. That is unprecedented, it's uncalled for, and it's hurtful, etc. Just very short.
So were you, that's a pretty ballsy thing to do. I mean, at that point...
Yeah, it was.
Were you just so frustrated, angry that it didn't really matter?
Even as I relive it, I get so agitated because I think it's so unnecessary. I mean, when you think about possible ways, you just think, how did you land on that one? But really, that was the agreed upon procedure to implement. There was nothing better. And yeah, I remember, I can see myself literally sitting in if I close my eyes and I visualize my office at that time. I was sharing it with 2 or 3 other marketing people, but I can see it. And I just remember sending it and just being pissed and livid. The good news is each of those 5 individuals came to my office before they left that's the other thing is when you were laid off, you were let go that day. So you were escorted out and you had time to get your stuff. But before all 5 of those people literally got escorted out of the building, each of them took time to come visit me and say thank you. Because remember, I CC'd them on the email. So that response validated my decision 100%, regardless of the perceived anxiety of, oh God, this took a lot of balls to do this. Who knows what's going to happen? And a year later, I got laid off. So I honestly do not know how much, if any, that connection, cause and effect is related, nor do I care. But I would do it again.
And so when you were let go, was it done in a more appropriate manner?
It certainly wasn't a fictitious meeting and let's all blindside you coming in. So yes, differently. When I got laid off, and there were a handful of us, 3 or 4 or 5 of us that year. I don't remember the exact number, but I do remember we knew when it was coming this time. So the timing was common knowledge. I honestly don't remember. I think how they positioned it was everyone in the marketing group would then go to a meeting individually, and only walking into the room would you see just your boss sitting there, or would you see your boss in HR? So it was still a mystery, yet no one was lied to ahead of time. And the big aha moment came is if there was a second person sitting there, if HR is sitting there, then, and as I walked in, there's HR, and I thought, oh, okay, I got it.
So over the time, did you then keep your office and desk, to the minimal amount of personal belongings to make the exit easy? Like at that point, are you already like, all right, I'm just going to have a coffee mug, a photo, a little plant, anything that I can just take out with my 2 hands?
Yes, it was the dead plant from the year before, so I refused to water it just to make it simpler. Well, it obviously it's a shock at the time. 7 or 8 years put in. That was the first time I ever got laid off, so it hits you, I think, most the very first time versus future times when you realize, less of a big deal. But the thing I did immediately was I grabbed a pair of scissors and walked over to that. Oh gosh, this is going to sound so morbid. Walked over to the office of that general manager who I'd emailed a year earlier, because hanging out front of his office was my photo. Because a month or 6 weeks prior, I had been recognized and winning the Marketer of the Month award. It just happened to be the month prior, so my photo was still hanging in front with a sash across saying Employer or Marketer of the Month behind glass or framed right in front of his office. So I thought, damn it, I want that photo. So I went over got the scissors, took the entire photo and text connector thing out, carefully cut my photo along the lines and put back the framer or the matting part so that all that was left hanging there was an empty hole or slot. And then I made a sash out of paper and a magic marker and just put the words "laid off" and then taped it diagonally across now the empty rectangle frame. And then went to my office, packed whatever I had, and headed out.
So I want to make sure I understand this. A month before you were laid off, you were awarded Marketer of the Month?
Correct. In fact, as I'm thinking about this, it might have been Marketer of the Quarter, because I honestly don't know if we did it every month, but I know we did it maybe every quarter, which is why maybe the photo was still hanging there weeks later. But it's definitely I think it was quarterly, so it must have been Marketer of the Quarter.
So here you are being recognized for outstanding work, and then
right. Every day in front of this man's office
is you.
For all visitors.
A friendly photo of you reminding him of one of his star performers.
Right.
And then when they're discussing, because I've been in some of these discussions where you're discussing, okay, who do we need to let go? It's like, let's get rid of the Marketer of the Quarter. We don't need Tim anymore.
It boggles the mind, which then makes me wonder, because when I sent that email a year prior, I got the only appreciative publicly I got were the 5 people that got laid off. A lot of others, given the culture, were pretty nervous or just, you just gave your death nail type of thing. And I blew it off. But, I mean, yeah, it makes you wonder, certainly. Did it come up in said meeting that said, let's bring this one back up. Yeah, remember that email? Okay, yeah, let's send a message. I honestly don't know, but it certainly sounds plausible.
Wow. Now, kind of now let's fast forward.
Right.
And doing the type of work that you do now, how do you help or advise leaders or companies when they're looking at, trying to make a decision about people to let go of, or like how has this experience informed the work you do now?
Well, it certainly has exposed me to how possibly worse could the process be. I honestly haven't heard since then an example that I would categorize as, hold my beer type of thing. But today, or in my coaching practice, as I'm sure you're familiar with, I challenge the leader or the executive who's making decisions like that is, okay, how are you deciding this? How do you want to decide this? What criteria are you using? At the end of the day, how do you want them to feel leaving? Because with the internet, there's so many vehicles and formats now for people to constantly share all the good and the bad, the ugly about a company. I mean, again, but prior internet, none of us knew all of the bad stuff that was going on financially. Where today, all employees, whether new or there, or the ones, unfortunately, that may be being let go, can learn everything. So it behooves a leader today to be much more cognizant of exiting perception, exiting awareness, and just the long-term effects that can just permeate. So it's really challenging with those what or how questions to help the executive think through maybe a lot of the potential ways it could unfold that maybe he or she hadn't even thought of yet.
Is there something that you would share for a leader or an HR professional who may be listening to this on how how do you get that person who you're going to let go into the room to have that conversation?
Great question. It's funny. The first thing that came to mind as you were asking that question was that movie with George Clooney, Up in the Air, where as soon as the employees saw the two, he and Anna Kendrick, rolling the suitcases in because it was filled with the boilerplate forms. I mean, I don't think it ever needs to be so stale and cold and robotic that I would immediately challenge someone arguing or challenging or debating the efficacy of it needs to be consistent. I'm like, okay, fine. What are the available options to keep it humane and keep it respectful? That's it. Yes, it's a business decision. Fine. People get that. That was the other thing I shared, and the 5 people who I alluded to that came back to my office, they said we knew we were going to probably, I was 50-50 thinking I was going to get hit anyway. They felt worse about being deceived.
Yeah. So keeping it, keeping it respectful.
Respectful, exactly.
Yeah.
As most honest and respectful as possible.
It's great. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's tough. I mean, I think I always hope that companies could also begin to give somebody a heads up if they know, a department is going to be eliminated or, due to, some changes in the business environment. Can you begin to let people know that things are, there's change is coming, and at least give people a little time to process it before just, kind of calling them in and having it happen so abruptly.
Well, you just sharing this reminded me of one of the other between layoff 1 and layoff 8 and layoff 7 that affected those 5 people. So somewhere between layoff 2 and 6, another way they did it, and I'm not promoting this one either, but we all came into our office. We all knew the day, so it was some Friday again. We all knew when it was happening. And then the way it was communicated the day before was when you all come in Friday and you turn on your computer, if you have an email from us, you're getting laid off. If you're not, if you don't have an email, you're not getting laid off. So now imagine everyone coming in, waiting to turn on their computer, and then just sitting in their own respected cubes, anxiously looking to see, okay, in their mailbox, will they have the quote losing ticket email or something?
Yeah. Wow. Sounds very Game of Thrones-esque.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that maybe they were trademarking "Winter is Coming" long before it
exactly.
showed up on HBO.
Wow. That's. I thought you were going to say if your computer doesn't turn on, please come to conference room 559.
Right. If it's like you get a gigantic, Joker face laughing.
Yeah. Sorry, you're gonna have you and your family are gonna have a really bad Christmas.
Right.
Since we are approaching Thanksgiving, there may be some people that have kind of give some unfortunate news. Any advice for them on what to do and how to behave if you get the pink slip?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because we talked obviously all about the format of the process, and that's, again, let's remember it's all about the person. As the old adage, like people will say, is a company's best asset is their people, and I challenge them and say, no, the company is the people. It's not even their best asset. The people are the company. So, it's short answer, kind of cliche. You're not your job. It's always a blessing in disguise, which only those that have been through it will recognize. That's the paradox. Because it turned out to be such a blessing, and I catapulted it into other opportunities that just got me on such a different path. So it was again a blessing in disguise in hindsight. So first, own it, and by that I mean allow yourself to grieve because it is a loss, and then recalibrate and say, okay, what's next, and what are the things then I want to ensure exist in what's next, because that'll just make it a better motivational fit anyway. And again, it rarely, if ever, has to do with you individually. It's bottom line, made in a room with pluses and minuses and balance sheets. It's okay. Thank you for the push. And I've heard that a lot from clients that I coach that have been forced into transition, that they've most always acknowledge that, well, I kind of thought of leaving, but only after I was pushed out did I have to face it. And that tends to be why it's a blessing, is because the company helped you make the decision that you were maybe wrestling with anyway.
Yeah, sure. I hear that a lot as well. Tim Dean, thank you very much for being on Not Suitable for Work.
Oh, Peter, thank you. Thank you very much. Happy to be here. Honored to be here.
There's nothing graceful or elegant about the process of letting someone go. It causes stress on the entire team. For the person delivering the news, there's angst and anxiety leading up to the event, as it's commonly referred to in some organizations. Once it's over and done, the bearer of bad news is immediately relieved and ready to get back to work. Everyone else who is just learning of the event, however, is dealing with the raw emotions for the first time and wants to process what just happened. And of course, there is the person being let go, whose world has just been turned upside down. I was fired while working at a small branding agency in New York. It happened at 6 p.m. on the Monday after the Christmas holiday break. I knew as soon as I stepped into my boss's office what was going to happen. There was a somber vibe in the air. This wasn't a surprise. I wasn't a good fit for the agency, but it's still hard hearing those words. This isn't working out, and today is your last day. I remember that immediate feeling of rejection. I think my boss thought he was doing the right thing firing me after the holidays. There was no HR department. My boss had to do it himself. He was very matter-of-fact. The discussion took no more than 5 minutes. I didn't make a scene. I just wanted to get out of there as quickly as I could. I quietly packed up my few belongings and walked out without telling my fellow colleagues. I was too embarrassed to tell them and didn't want to endure another awkward conversation. I'm curious to hear from you. How would you want to be given the pink slip? I want to thank you for listening to Not Suitable for Work. If you haven't, take a quick second to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast. If you want more Not Suitable for Work or have a work story to share, be sure to follow us on Facebook at Not Suitable for Work. You can find us on Apple Podcast or wherever you find your podcast. If you have a question you want answered on a future episode, hit me up on Twitter at Peter C. Diamond. Not Suitable for Work is produced by Matt Cunningham at Truthful Enthusiasm. Get your story online with truthfulenthusiasm.com. Until next time.